My dear students, welcome to EPG Patashala. I am Professor G. Vedaparayana, retired from the Department of Philosophy, SU University, Tirupati. Now we are going to take up the paper of E. Patashala, that is Indian Religion and Philosophy. The module that I am going to take up now is Nyaya system. Nyaya system is one of the important systems in the Shat Darshanas, and it is also allied to another system, that is Vaisheshika. Nyaya system is one of the logical systems which is based on reasoning, and it has taken out the blemish that Indian philosophy is purely mystical and religious. Basing on the Nyaya system, we can say that Indian philosophy is as logical and as rational that of Western philosophy. Very prominent thinkers have proved that Nyaya philosophy is very logical and rational system. So the learning objectives that we are going to take up in this module is first introduction and epistemology. In that epistemology, we are going to take up the four means of perception, that is perception, inference, comparison, and verbal testimony. And next, another important section in this module is metaphysics, that is causation, soul, God, and the world. Next, we are going to give some summary about the entire teaching that we have taken up. In introduction, we are going to speak about sage Gautama, or Gautama is also known as Akshapada, as the founder of Nyaya system. The meaning of Nyaya is argumentation, science of reasoning, Tarka Shastra. Predominantly, it is epistemological, intellectual, and analytical and logical. Variously called, it is also a science of logic and epistemology. Pramana Shastra, the science of causes, it is also known as Hetu Vidya. It is also called the science of debate, that is Vada Vidya, the science of critical study on Vikshaki. So therefore, it is called variously by various people, that there is reasoning in that, there is logic in that, there is argumentation in that. So therefore, Gautama Nyaya Sutra is the main source of this school. When we come to the sources of the school, the text of this school, this is Nyaya Sutra is the main source of this philosophy, that is Gautama has written, who is the founder of this system. And also other important sources of this school is Vatsayana's Nyaya Bhashya, and Udyotkara's Nyaya Vartika, and Vachaspati's Tatparya Tika. Apart from these three commentaries on the original source, that is Nyaya Sutra, there are two more books written by Udayana and Jayanta. Udayana's is Nyaya Kusumanjali and Jayanta's Nyaya Manjari are the other important sources of this school. So, as I have said in the introduction, Nyaya is allied to another system, that is Vaisheshika system, and Vaisheshika is predominantly metaphysical and Nyaya is predominantly epistemological. The one deals, Nyaya deals with the right knowledge of reality, and the other, that is Vaisheshika, takes up the exposition of reality. Nyaya adopts mostly the Vaisheshika metaphysics, called the system of atomic pluralism and logical realism. Both together we can call Nyaya Vaisheshika as atomic pluralism and logical realism. See, both the systems are concerned with the earthly life of man as suffering and also liberation from suffering. These two systems agree that bondage is due to ignorance of reality, and liberation consists in the right knowledge of reality. Then some more points as a part of introduction is that there are important points of differences between these two syncretic schools, that is Vaisheshika and Nyaya. Vaisheshika recognizes only 7 categories, whereas Nyaya accepts 16 categories. How can we account for 16 categories? Means apart from 7 categories of Vaisheshika, Nyaya takes up 4 pramanas and also the 9 prameyas or categories as the part of these categories. So 9, 4 and 7 together, they are called 16 categories according to Nyaya. Vaisheshika admits only 2 pramanas, that is means of knowledge, that is perception and inference, whereas Nyaya accepts 4 pramanas. Pramanas means means of knowledge, that is perception, inference, comparison and verbal testimony. So these are some of the differences that we find between Nyaya and Vaisheshika, although they are syncretic schools, which means they are very much related to each other. So coming to this epistemological part, we are going to deal with the part of knowledge. What is knowledge? What are the sources of knowledge? And what is the right kind of knowledge? What is the right kind of knowledge? And various kinds of divisions that we find in Nyaya epistemology regarding knowledge. So according to Nyaya, knowledge is cognition. This is the first definition they have given about knowledge. Knowledge means cognition. Cognition means seeing thing as it is. It is also known as, which means it means knowledge, is also known as apprehension or being consciousness or having an experience of the object, which means having an anubhava, having an upalabdhi of an object is called a knowledge. Again, another way of interpreting knowledge is knowledge reveals both subject and the object. See, it is not enough that only knowledge reveals only object. Knowledge should reveal the subject also, that I know the object. So I am revealed and the object is also revealed. Here revelation or manifestation of the object, that is artha prakasha. Just as a lamp reveals objects, just as lamp reveals objects in darkness, dispelling darkness. So if I say I know something, I have knowledge about something, it means that object is revealed to me, or knowledge about the object is revealed to me. Nyaya says that knowledge may be valid or invalid. These are the 2 fundamental differences that we find in the analysis of knowledge by Nyaya system, that is valid knowledge and invalid knowledge. What is valid knowledge? Valid knowledge is right apprehension of the object is valid knowledge. And valid knowledge must correspond with the reality. It is paratah pramanyavada. Paratah pramanyavada means if only I know something other than myself, then only there is knowledge. I can't say that I myself is the evidence of knowledge. Evidence of knowledge is revealed by something other than the knower. So valid knowledge is the manifestation of the object as it is. It is only then we can call it valid knowledge. Seeing the object as it is, revelation of the object as it is. Then invalid knowledge, which is the opposite of valid knowledge, is that which fails to manifest its object as it is. If we see something as something else different from what it is there, then that is invalid knowledge. And invalid knowledge has 4 kinds of sources. How you get invalid knowledge means it is through memory, it is through doubt, it is through error, it is through hypothetical reasoning. 4 kinds of means give you the invalid knowledge. See, in memory what happens is, memory is invalid because it is representative, not presentative cognition, which means you are saying that you have seen something in the past, not in the present. So memory cannot be taken as the true knowledge, which means presentational knowledge. Then doubt. Yes, we know very well that a doubt cannot be taken as the right kind of knowledge, means I am not sure about what I know. Doubt is invalid because it is uncertain cognition. Uncertain cognition. So the next error. Error, yes, it is very commonsensical to say that error involves misapprehension of the object and it doesn't correspond with the real object. If I say, rope, I mistake it for snake and get afraid of it. So it is error, erroneous knowledge. Then hypothetical reasoning. Hypothetical reasoning also means that I am not sure If it may be this or it may be that. Or conditional knowledge. If it is there, then only it will be correct. So therefore, hypothetical reasoning involves supposition, devoid of certainty, as in the case of the argument, if there were no fire, there cannot be or there would not be smoke. This is conditional. So we can't say that I am talking about something very certain that there is fire. We can't say that. Then these are the four important kinds of perception according to Nyaya epistemology, and according to these four sources we are going to derive valid knowledge. Four kinds of valid knowledge produced by four kinds of means. See, the peculiarity of our Nyaya system is perception is not only the means of knowledge, it is also knowledge itself. Inference is also means of knowledge, it is knowledge itself. Comparison also, it is a means of knowledge, it is knowledge itself. So is the case with verbal testimony. So in Sanskrit it is called pratyaksha, inference is called anumana, and comparison is called upamana, verbal testimony is called shabda. Now let us take up what is perception. This is the first kind of valid means of knowledge. Perception is produced by the intercourse of the sense organs with the objects. Perception is possible only when the sense organs and the object, they meet together. So this is a direct and immediate cognition. Whatever I perceive, it is a direct knowledge, it is also immediate knowledge, which means it is not derived by any means other than cognition. I am not dependent on any other means. So that is why this is called perception. It involves, important things that it involves, perception, that is contact of the self with manas, and manas with the sense organs, and sense organs with objects. See, there are three components in the operation of perception. That is, what are the three components? Self, manas, and sense organs. These are there with the knower. And another is objects are there outside. So when can I see these objects? Only when the self is in contact with manas. And manas also should come into contact with sense organs. See, these three together, they play a part in getting related to the objects. Only then there is knowledge. Then there are two stages in perception. Again, perception, we have seen what is the mechanism of perception. Now we are seeing stages in perception. That is, first stage of perception is indeterminate perception. Next stage is determinate perception. Indeterminate, in Sanskrit it is called nirvikalpa. Determinate is called savikalpa. Let us see what it means. See, indeterminate perception is associated with just a name. And also it is immediate perception, which is bare awareness, direct sense experience of the object. It is free from assimilation, discrimination, analysis and synthesis. It is also a consciousness of that which is not determined by consciousness of the what. See, if I have the indeterminate perception or indeterminate knowledge of an object, it means I can only say what is that. I cannot say what is what. I cannot say what. I can only say that is an object. That is an object. If I see a chair, I say that is an object. But I cannot say that is a chair. I cannot answer the question what is it. So indeterminate perception presents the bare object without any characterization. It is only just psychological and not logical. A person who is in the stage of indeterminate perception, he cannot reason. He cannot give reasons for his perception. He cannot be logical in his presentation of the knowledge that he has. It is only psychological, means it is only confined to psyche, not to the level of mind and reasoning. It is only confined to feeling also. I have a feeling, I have a sensation, devoid of conception. See, what is the difference between sensation and conception? Sensation means you have a feeling. but you do not have the knowledge. What is that kind of feeling? You can't name it. Even if you name it, you cannot clearly say that this is the knowledge I have of it. You can't talk about it, you can't explain it, you can't describe it. So that is a very primary stage of perception. Then it immediately passes into determinate perception. That is second stage of perception, which is logical, cognitive and judgmental. So this is determinate perception. So determinate perception we can explain further, that is Savikalpaka perception. It is with the names and attributes, seeing rope as rope, cow as cow. If I see cow in indeterminate, previous stage, I cannot say that it is cow. I only see cow. But now I know that it is cow. I know the name of the object that I have seen, which means I have a very definite knowledge about the object that I have seen. If I see chair, I say it is chair with certainty, without any doubt. So why it is so? It involves assimilation, discrimination, analysis and synthesis. So these are the four kinds of operations that are necessary to make the indeterminate perception into determinate perception. Sure knowledge is possible only there is assimilation, discrimination, analysis and synthesis in the mind, which means you have come to the rational stage or logical stage. Differentiated knowledge. See, this is determinate knowledge, is a differentiated knowledge, is a relational knowledge, is a conceptual knowledge, and an articulated knowledge. Articulated knowledge means I am able to express it, not only just confining to myself. And seeing a white moving object at a distance, and when it comes near, seeing it as a white cow. So this is, as long as the white object is at a distance, I have the indeterminate knowledge about it. As the cow is coming nearer and nearer, nearer and nearer, I say yes, this is cow. Then it has come to the stage of determinate perception. So earlier stage of perception is indeterminate and later is determinate perception in the example of the cow that we have taken. So two perceptions cannot be separated in reality. They can be separated only in thought, which means the determinate and indeterminate perceptions are not totally separated. We can only think about the separation. I can't say where it begins, where the other ends, where the indeterminate ends, where the determinate starts. We can't clearly differentiate it. See, there is another kind of division in perception apart from determinate and indeterminate. There are two other kinds of perception, that is ordinary perception and extraordinary perception. In Sanskrit it is called, ordinary is called laukika, extraordinary is called alaukika. So ordinary perception takes place when sense organs come into contact with objects in a usual way. That is our own experience, daily experience is ordinary perception. And in this perception again there are two kinds of ordinary perception, that is internal ordinary perception, external ordinary perception. So internal perception is the mind coming into contact with the physical state and the processes such as cognition, affection, conation, desire, pleasure and pain. This is internal. See, how I know I have pleasure, how I know I have a knowledge about something. This is internal. That is why it is called internal kind of perception. Ordinary, laukika kind of perception. Again, external perception is 5 external sense organs coming into contact with their respective external objects. Then there is 5 kinds of external perception, because if eye sees some object, that is one kind of knowledge. Ear, auditory, we hear something and we have the knowledge of it, that is second kind. Third kind is tactual, which means we touch something and say, yes, this is something, this is wood or this is water or this is something. So tactually there is third kind of external perception. And gustatory. Gustatory means taste. I taste something and say, there is this is sugar or salt, something like that. Then olfactory. This is affective, no? This is olfactory. It must be olfactory. I think it is affective also, but you can say it is olfactory. Olfactory means you smell something and say, yes, this is a rose. This is the smell of a rose and all that. So these are the 5 kinds of external perception brought about 5 sense organs of sight, sound, touch, taste and smell. Then we go to the external sense organs are composed of material elements, earth, water, fire and air and ether. And sense organs are also composed of the atoms of earth, that we perceive smell, the specific quality of the earth. So same is the case with other 4 sense organs and their respective qualities. Each sense organ has its own quality with which it is associated, and they are composed of material elements specific to them. Each sense organ is composed of material elements, and that we are going to see in the subject of atomism. Atoms are composed of various kinds. So extraordinary perception, that is alaukika perception, means sense organs coming into contact with unusual way with the object. That is 3 kinds of extraordinary perception is there. Perception of the universal, that is samanya lakshana. When we see particular cow in extraordinary kind of perception, we see the universal cowness inhering in the cow, because we have seen several cows. If I see one particular cow, we imagine that there is a universal quality called cowness which is applicable to all kinds of cows. Then second kind of extraordinary perception is through association. This is called Gnana Lakshana, which means object is not directly presented to sense organs but is received in memory through past cognition of it. Definitely, we see something and then recollect something that we have seen in the past. That is, just as we experience in ordinary daily life, that is based on memory. Gnana Lakshana is based on memory knowledge. Then third is intuitive perception of all objects, past, present and future. This is called Yogaja Lakshana. Yogaja Lakshana is possible only for yogis, which means this is not a rational knowledge, this is not knowledge based on memory, it is intuitive knowledge, that is supra-sensuous knowledge. It is also supra-rational and it is possessed by mainly yogins through power of meditation. So this is the concern with the yogis, not ordinary kind of people. Then we come to second pramana, that is anumana, which means in English we call it inference. According to Nyaya, we have said that there are 4 kinds of means of knowledge. We have seen so far the perception, various kinds of perception, various divisions of perception according to Nyaya. And now we are taking up the second means of perception or second kind of knowledge according to Nyaya, that is inference. In Sanskrit it is called anumana. So anumana is inferential knowledge, or it is also called relational knowledge. It is the cognition which presupposes some other knowledge. Unless I have the knowledge of something else, I cannot have the knowledge of the present object. This is the main crux of this pramana called perception. So inferential knowledge, it is called indirect knowledge also. It is mediate knowledge, not immediate knowledge. Immediate knowledge is perception. This is mediate, which means it should be mediated by some other thing apart from the thing that we are knowing here. And it arises through a mark. Mark means a significant mark. It is in English called hetu. Hetu means a kind of reasoning. If you say that I know this, you have to show some hetu or reason for saying that I know this object now. This mark is called the middle term. Middle term, we are going to see what is this middle term in more detail in the next in the coming slides. This is also called in Sanskrit linga, that is the middle term is called linga, it is also called hetu. And it is contained in the minor term. Minor term in Sanskrit it is called paksha dharmata, which means it is invariably associated with the major term that is called sadhya. Invariable connection of the middle term with the major term is the invariable concomitance. It is in Sanskrit called vyapti, or between middle term and major term. This is vyapti called avinabhava niyama, we can call avinabhava niyama, which means invariable concomitant relationship between the middle term and major term. Now we are going to see with an example what it is. So invariable connection is the nerve of inferential knowledge. What is the connection? Connection between middle term and major term. It is knowledge or mana which arises after anu, which means other knowledge, which means paramarsha, after inquiry, after association of things, after anu means after something only you derive this knowledge. So that is why it is called anumana. We are now analyzing what is meant by anumana. Anumana is the Sanskrit term for inference. So therefore anu means which comes after, mana means knowledge, and it is also called knowledge of paramarsha. So it arises through the knowledge of presence of the major term in the minor term through the middle term which resides in the minor term. So Nayayika illustrates it with the following example. Example is a famous example. Many student of Indian philosophy must be knowing about this famous example, which is, if I see or we see smoke in the hill, we conclude or infer that there must be fire in the hill. See, this is a mediate kind of knowledge or inferential kind of knowledge. I am not directly seeing the object of knowledge, but I am only inferring the object of knowledge. What is I am seeing? I am seeing something else. I am seeing smoke in the hill. I am not seeing fire. After having seen smoke in the hill, because of my past experience, that wherever there is smoke, there is bound to be fire. Therefore, I am able to say or conclude that there must be fire on the hill because there is smoke. Now analyze. Let us analyze this statement and have a very clear knowledge about what is inferential knowledge. Here, hill is the minor term, fire is the major term, and smoke is the middle term. In Sanskrit, minor term is called paksha, major term is called sadhya, middle term is called hetu. This is the main thing, the crux of the inferential knowledge, as we have already seen. Hetu, or the mark, or the reason. This is the heart of inferential knowledge. So knowledge that smoke is invariably found with fire. In Sanskrit, this relationship is called vyapti. Vyapti is one of the greatest concepts in Indian philosophy, particularly in Nyaya system, which means invariable concomitant relationship between the middle term and major term, that is fire and smoke. Because smoke cannot be there without fire. That is why I have this inferential definite knowledge. Therefore, I am able to come to a conclusion in this kind of knowledge. We know in Western philosophy, there is also syllogism in Western logic, which has only 3 terms, whereas in Nyaya syllogism, we have 5 terms, 5 avayavas, 5 members. It is constituted with 5 parts. So first part is proposition, that is pratigna. Then is reason. Then is universal concomitance with an example, that is udaharana. and application of the universal concomitants, that is to the present case. You have to apply the universal concomitants, your knowledge of a concomitants, to the present case. That is Upanaya. Then I come to the conclusion that there is fire in the hill. That is called in English conclusion. In Sanskrit it is called Nigamana. So this is the explanation of these 5 angas. What is proposition? In the statement that we have said, this hill has fire. I have made a proposition. Then why are you saying that this hill has fire? Because it has smoke. So I have given reason. That is, I have given hetu. Then how can you say that if there is smoke, then there is fire? How can you say? Because I know very well that whatever has smoke has fire. This is the invariable concomitant knowledge that I have. Then I am applying the third part to the fourth one. I am showing it in the fourth one by applying the concomitant, very invariable concomitants to this example. That is, this hill has smoke which is invariably associated with fire. Therefore, I am able to conclude that this hill has fire. So this is typically the syllogistic method that we find in Western philosophy. As I have just now said, there are only 3 terms or 3 premises, whereas in Indian Nyaya syllogism there are 5 premises, which means they have only elaborated it to make us easy, to make it easy or to make it more intelligible. They have made it into 5 angas. They have given example also into consideration, and they have taken the first statement also as an anga instead of only 3 premises. Now there are 2 kinds of inference, that is inference for oneself and inference for others. In Sanskrit, inference for oneself is called Swartha Anumana, whereas inference for others is called Parartha Anumana. Parartha Anumana means the inferential knowledge for the sake of others. Swartha Anumana means inferential knowledge for the sake of myself. If I want to know myself and I need not tell what I know, I need not go to the level of Parartha Anumana. I can limit myself to Swartha Anumana. See, farmer doesn't require formal statement. Farmer means here Swartha Anumana. I need not make a statement in syllogistic form and say to other people that I know this because of these reasons and all that. I need not explain to others. So this is Swartha Anumana is more psychological. Psychological in the sense, it is confined to myself, it is confined to my own mind, my own thinking. It is internal, we can also call it internal. Whereas Parartha Anumana is external, and also it is a cognition for others which requires to be presented in language, in articulation. And this is 3 kinds of inference. What is? Parartha Anumana is of 3 kinds, that is inferring the unperceived effect from the perceived cause, inferring the unperceived cause from the perceived effect, inferring based on uniformity of coexistence. These 3 respectively called Purvavat, Sheshavat and Samanyato Drishta, which means, see, inference of the unperceived effect from the perceived cause. See, if I see that the clouds, for instance, I will imagine that there may be rain, and if I see the ground is wet, I can say that yes, it must have rained. Then 3 kinds of other 3 kinds of inference are also there, apart from what we have just seen. They are Kevala Anvayi, Kevala Vetireki, Anvaya Vetireki. These are the three kinds which we are going to see with the examples. Kevala Anvayi takes place when the middle term is positively related to the major term. Example, all knowable objects are nameable. Example is the pot is a knowable object, therefore pot is nameable. See, if I say that I know something, you must be able to say what is its name. If I am not able to say what is its name, it doesn't mean that you do not know it. This is the main contention of the Naiyayikas. For having full knowledge, you must be able to know the name of it, because the name differentiates this particular object from other object. If I don't name it, we can't say that it is different from other objects. You should be able to differentiate. So knowledge involves the separation of one object from other objects. Then Kevala Vetireki. Kevala Vetireki takes place when the middle term is always negatively related to the major term. See the example here. What is not different from other elements has no smell. The earth has no smell, therefore earth is different from other elements, which means it is a negative way of putting the first example. Kevala, this is Vetireki, that is Kevala Anvayi. Third one is Anvaya Vetireki. It takes place when the middle term is both positively and negatively related to the major term, which is what is happening in the first two examples. It takes place in one place, that is Anvaya Vetireki, that is the concomitance between the middle and major terms is there in respect of both presence and absence. Not only in presence, not only in the absence, but both when they are there, both when they are not there. For example, they agree in present in the positive instances. For example, all things which have smoke have fire. This hill has smoke, therefore this hill has fire. This is the agreement, saying something positively. And next is middle term and major terms, they agree with each other even in the absence or in the negative instances. If something is not there, the other thing will not also be there. For example, no non-fiery things have smoke. Definitely, if there is no fire, there is no smoke. And this hill has smoke, therefore this hill has non-fiery. Non-fiery, see, we are putting it in negative terms. So this hill has fire. This is the another example. Then we are coming to third means of knowledge according to Nyaya, that is comparison. It is called in Sanskrit Upamana. This is also one of the very important means of knowledge of the four kinds of means of knowledge. This is the third one, that is comparison. What is comparison? How the Nayayika defines comparison? Here cognition is derived from by means of comparison between two objects. Or you see some kind of similarity between two objects, then you come to the knowledge of the object which you have not seen now. So defined as the knowledge of relation between word and its denotation. See here, word and denotation is also playing a very important role in this means of knowledge. This is produced by the knowledge of similarity or resemblance. For example, recognizing a wild cow in the forest as cow or as Gavaya, depending on the similarity with the cow that I have seen in my daily life. See, if you go to forest and see some animal which is looking like Gavaya, and somebody has told me that there is something animal called Gavaya in the forest, then I come to a conclusion, yes, this must be Gavaya, because my friend had told me that Gavaya looks like cow that is there in our daily experience. So a person who has never seen Gavaya and does not know what it is, This is the position of the person who is having a knowledge by means of comparison. I have not seen Gavaya so far, but I have gone to the forest and suddenly I saw it there and I come to know that it is Gavaya because my friend had told me that it looks like cow. So recognizing it as wild cow because he was told, which means Shabda. It is Shabda means word, hearing or telling by somebody, by another person, that a wild cow looks like a domestic cow. So person has heard the word Gavaya and has been told that it is like an ordinary cow. Person himself sees animal denoted by the word Gavaya and then recognizes it to be so. Comparison is knowledge of the relation between name and the object denoted by it. It is produced by the knowledge of similarity between the wild cow, that is Gavaya, and the ordinary cow, which we see it at home. So this is the main process of comparison. We have seen a very important source of knowledge. Then we come to fourth one. This is verbal testimony. In Sanskrit it is called Shabda. Verbal testimony means it can be by the word by a friend or by a text. It can be a sacred text or it can be an ordinary text. It can be by a reliable man or it may not be a reliable man, but we are going to see the conditions that Nayayika is going to prescribe to arrive at valid knowledge through this means called verbal testimony. So it is defined as the statement of a trustworthy or an authoritative person. Apta Vachana. See the meaning of it. Apta Vachana. Apta Vachana means you have to take a person who is trustworthy. Then only you can take the word for authentic knowledge. So it constitutes an understanding the meaning of the authoritative statement. Words and sentences have the power to convey their meaning. So this is one of the important points that you have to bear in mind. Why Shabda has become a means of knowledge means even words also have power to give knowledge. And therefore their meaning is also more powerful. Only by the meaning of the word I derive the knowledge. And these words derive the power from God. I mean, these Nayayikas go to the extent of saying that the words derive power not only through human being, not only by a trustworthy person, a very good person, but even from God. How can a word has the power of giving knowledge? Because it is getting that kind of power from God and also from long established convention. Long established convention means if we are using one word that it means something. I also believe the same kind of thing. If my parents have believed that there is God, even though I don't know what is God, I believe that I have some meaning that there is God. So convention also plays a very important role. Convention means tradition. Traditionally, words have very strong power because they have been there for a long time in our customs and conventions. So testimony is always personal, trustworthy words, may be divine or human. I have explained already that the person who gives you some knowledge may be an ordinary person or maybe a divine person also. And there are two kinds of testimony again. Vedic and secular. Vedic and secular. Vedic means whatever Vedas says, it should be authentic, it should be believable, we cannot question it. This is what is there in Indian tradition. Vedic word is final. Even Smrutis depend on Shruti. Shruti means Vedas. Smruti means Puranas and all that. Puranas may not be that reliable, but Shruti or Veda is a very reliable source of knowledge. Whatever is said there, it is correct, it must be correct, it cannot be fallacious. But secular kind of testimony means testimony given by the ordinary kinds of people and also books written by ordinary people, ordinary scholars. So if some book which is not a Vedic scripture, it is giving some kind of knowledge, I have to doubt it. I can't take it as trustworthy as the Vedic word, the word of a ordinary book, ordinary person, that is secular means of knowledge. We have to doubt it, we have to take it with some kind of pinch of doubt. So Vedic testimony is perfect, infallible, because Vedas are spoken by God. This is what Nayayika believes. And secular testimony is not infallible. Is not infallible means it is fallible. It is susceptible to failure. It is susceptible to doubt. Today it may be correct, tomorrow the secular testimony, secular word may be proved false. So it is utterly uttered by human beings who are liable to err. Human beings are subject to commit errors in whatever they say. Therefore, we have to be very careful about taking the verbal testimony of secular people and secular books. So, regards valid knowledge as a trustworthy person who always speaks truth. So, if somebody is there who has established this kind of reputation that a person always speaks truth, then others also readily believe, yes, he is a good person, trustworthy person. He is well known all over the world that he always speaks truth. Therefore, whatever he speaks, we take it as valid. And 4 kinds of conditions for words of a trustworthy person. See, if you take an ordinary kind of person, we have to take 4 conditions into consideration. Unless these 4 conditions are satisfied, we cannot take the word of ordinary person, a Laukika person, secular person as true. What are these 4? First is the mutual implication or expectancy, akanksha. See, words should have mutual expectation. That means words should not be a mere aggregate of unrelated words like cow, horse, man. If somebody said just cow, horse, man, then you cannot say that he has spoken something trustworthy, something meaningful. So if I say something to somebody else, the words should have subject, predicate and object. Then only there is meaning to that sentence. And second condition is word should possess fitness to convey the sense and should not contradict the meaning. That is, word should have the yogyata. Yogyata means clear meaning. There should be no contradiction, there is no ambiguity in what a person says to other person. For example, see, water the plants with fire. See, what is the kind of knowledge that you are getting? That's a contradictory statement. Contradictory in the sense, how can you water plants with fire? You have to water plants with water only. But the person is saying, put fire to the water, which means you are burning. You are going to burn, not you are going to grow them. So that's a contradictory statement. And the third condition is, the words should follow close proximity. That is, sannidhi. If I write some sentence, the word subject here, object at the other end of the paper, and the verb somewhere else, it should not be there. It should be very close to each other. If I say Rama is a man, Rama should be succeeded by is and good man. Otherwise, it cannot make any sense. So proximity is another important condition for having the trustworthiness. Fourth condition is the intention of the speaker. The intention of the speaker, it is Sanskrit, it is called tatparya. With what intention the speaker is speaking to other person is more important than anything else. See, words should not have ambiguous expressions, because ambiguity or equivocality. This is also called equivocality, means it creates confusion. Take for example the term Saindhava. See, Saindhava means it may be a horse, name of the horse, it is also the name of salt. If while I am eating, if I say Saindhava, you should not bring horse to me, you should bring only salt to me. So we should be very careful in speaking words in the context. You have to understand the words in relation to the context, because words have different meanings. No word has only one word, and the meaning of the word is not only in the word but also in the circumstances. Depending on the circumstances, word derives its meaning, like Saindhava. It's a very good example that Nayayikas have given. Saindhava, while I am eating food, it is not the horse, it is only salt. So now we are going to take up another important part of Nyaya system, that is metaphysics. And we have already said that metaphysics is actually the major part of the Vaisheshika system. But at the same time, there is another important topic in Nyaya, that is, causation, which forms part of Nyaya metaphysics. We are going to see what is this causation. And Nyaya's causation is called in Sanskrit the Asat Karyavada, which means the cause is not, effect is not there in the cause. So Nyaya system defines cause, an unconditional, invariable antecedent effect. And effect is an unconditional and invariable consequent of a cause. So same cause produces the same effect, and same effect is produced by the same cause. It rules out the theory of plurality of causes. And the three essential conditions or features of the cause is, it should be antecedent, it should be invariable, it should be unconditional. So these are the three important conditions that we come to explain now. So cause must be an antecedent, which means prior to its effect. Unless cause is before the effect, we cannot call it cause. Cause should not be after the effect. So invariable precedent is the cause, and also unconditional, which means necessarily. It is just not precedence, it is unconditional precedence, always, and necessarily, it's a must. So these are the effective conditions. And accidental conditions of the effect cannot be taken as the cause of the effect. For instance, potter's staff, which is the remote cause, you can't take it as the cause of the effect called pot. And also mere precedence in the case of night and day is not causally related, which means here there is not necessity, there is mere precedence, therefore it can't be taken as the causality. And unnecessary things like potter's ass is not unconditional antecedent, and therefore it is not a cause. Nyaya Vaisheshika theory of causation is Asat Karyavada or Arambhavada. In Sanskrit we are calling it Asat Karyavada. Arambhavada means effect is a new beginning, and the cause does not contain the effect in it. The effect takes as a new product. So it means effect is non-existent and its production is only after it is produced. It doesn't pre-exist in its cause. So it is a new creation, which is, effect is a new creation marking the beginning of a new product, new entity. So it comes into being by destroying its prior non-existence. See, this is a very important statement. Prior non-existence, that is abhava, is there. Effect in the form of abhava is there, and when it is produced, this abhava becomes bhava, which means it comes into origination. So this is what they say it. So the effect is an epigenetic and distinct from its cause, and neither an appearance nor transformation of the cause. We should not take the effect as the appearance of the cause or the transformation of the cause. No, cause is entirely destroyed when the effect is produced. This is newly brought into existence, and the operation of the cause ceases to be there. And Nyaya Vaisheshika theory of causation is opposed to Sankhya and Vedanta view of causation, that is Satkaryavada. So we have to deal a little bit with the other systems here to differentiate the Nyaya theory of causation from the Sankhya and Vedantic theories of causation, which is known as Satkaryavada. In opposition to Nyaya, these systems have said that effect is there in the cause. Cause possesses the effect, and the effect is only a modification of the cause. This, the Nyayika people do not accept it. So Nyaya emphasizes the strict sequence of causality. Cause and effect cannot be simultaneous. It rejects the theory of plurality of causes. Plurality of causes means one cause produces only one effect. There is only one relation between cause and effect, which means no cause can produce many effects, and no effect can be produced by many causes. This is what is meant by causal relation is one relation, not many one relation. Cause and effect are reciprocal also, and one cause can produce one effect only. This is one relation. Effect has its distinctive feature and also a new significance. So effect pre-exists. That is, Advaitic standpoint. Then there are three kinds of cause according to Nyayika. That is material cause. That is upadana or inherent cause. What does it mean? Material cause is the substance out of which the effect is produced. Example, threads are inherent in the cause, namely the cloth. The non-inherent cause is asamavayi. That is, first one is samavayi, now asamavayi. This is non-inherent cause which does not inherent in the material cause but helps the production of the effect. For example, conjunction of threads, which is non-inherent in the cause of the cloth, of which threads are the material or inherent cause. Then third one is efficient cause, which means this is a nimitta karana. What is efficient cause? It is the power which helps the material cause to produce effect. For example, weaver is the efficient cause of the cloth. It includes the accessories like loom, shuttle of the weaver. Efficient cause may be a substance or a quality or an action. So now the third part that we are going to take up in this Nyaya Vaisheshika system is, it is also related in a way to the metaphysical part of it, that is soul, God and the world. So what is soul, what is God, what is world, what is liberation, what is suffering, that we are going to see now. So according to Nyaya, it regards God and creation of the world. Metaphysics, God is there and God has created this world. And its allied system, Vaisheshika also believes in the teleological creation, which means these Nyayikas, as far as this part of metaphysics is concerned, they have also taken what the Vaisheshika have already said. And Vaisheshika is prior to Nyaya system, therefore, in explaining the soul, God, liberation, the world, they have taken the metaphysics of Vaisheshika into consideration. That's why we are referring to Vaisheshika system here. So there are eternal atoms of earth, water, fire and air. So these are the material causes of this universe, and God is the efficient cause. And individuals are infinite in number. Individual souls are there, and they are also co-eternal with atoms. So God is co-eternal with atoms and souls, and it's external to both. So creation means combination of atoms, and destruction means dissolution of the combination of the atoms. So this is materialistic way of explanation. How this combination takes place, let us see now. Combination or dissolution are caused by the motion supplied by the unseen power, which means the law of karma. Working under the guidance of God. So here God also is not directly creating the world. God is only helping the unseen power, the law of karma, to produce the world. So the cause of creation is the unseen power, which means the law of karma. So law of causation is subservient to law of karma. Law of causation means if some atoms are coming together and something is produced, see if the human being is produced, some atoms are coming together. And how it is they are coming together? Because of their law of karma. And God is helping the law of karma to produce something or to destroy something. So God can neither create atoms nor destroy atoms or souls directly without the help of unseen power. So God is not the real creator of this universe. God is regarded only efficient cause and ruler of this universe. A real efficient cause belongs to the unseen power, just as I explained now. So individual soul is the substratum of the quality of consciousness. See, consciousness is only adventitious or non-essential characteristic of the soul. And soul is the real knower, real enjoyer and active agent. Also an eternal substance like God or the atom. And individual souls are infinite and distinct from one another, and they are different from God, who is the supreme soul. Cognitions, affections and conations are the attributes of the individual souls. Each soul has its own mind and empirical life. Bondage is due to ignorance and karma. Liberation is due to knowledge and destruction of karma. In liberation, the soul becomes distinct from its mind, body and experiences. So this is the crux of the metaphysics of Nyaya system, where he has clearly said what is soul, what is individual soul, what is God, what is unseen power, how they interact with each other to bring out creation of the world and other souls, and also what is suffering and what is liberation. Now Nyaya system is allied to Vaisheshika, as I have said in the beginning of this lecture, and it advocates atomism, and it is a realistic system, it is a pluralistic system, and it is also spiritualism, and also it is theism. Theism means it accepts the existence of God, and also it is an orthodox system. Orthodox system in the sense it accepts the authority of the Vedas. And I repeat once again that it is argumentative, it is logical, it is epistemological, whereas Vaisheshika is metaphysical and ontological. So Nyaya is known for its methodological and systematic analytical approach, and it is regarded as the science of debate, critical study and reasoning. And before closing, I would like to make a critical remark mentioned by Sri Harsha with regard to the concept of liberation according to Nyaya. What Nyaya says? Nyaya says liberation means soul becoming pure, bereft of all qualities, even the quality of joy or bliss, because all qualities are adventitious. It is not only that suffering is gone, even the joy is also not there in the state of liberation. The soul becomes petrified. This is what they say. It becomes like a stone. And Sri Harsha criticizes Gautama for giving this kind of liberation or explanation to liberation, that soul is like a petrified thing which doesn't have any qualities. And he has gone to the extent of saying that Gautama has proved to be an animal in giving this kind of interpretation to liberation. Thank you very much.